Hello, I'm Sami Zaidan. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, your weekly look at the world of business and economics. This week, why Pakistan's new leader is facing some tough financial questions. Also this week, wildfires. We'll be taking a look at the economic and human cost of extreme heat events. Plus,
I'm Adrian Brown in the heart of China's soy country, where local farmers say they've got a lot to thank President Trump for. Find out why here on Al Jazeera.
fresh from elections, Pakistan is facing a financial squeeze. The economy is running low on foreign reserves. Now, Pakistan has had 14 IMF financing programs since 1980, and new loans are likely to come with strict conditions. Talk of a bailout is putting the country's economic relationship with China in focus. The $57 billion China-Pakistan economic corridor has led to massive imports from China. US officials are linking the Chinese super project to Pakistan's financial ills. They're demanding details on the terms of any Chinese loans. But Islamabad is accusing the US of trying to sour Pakistan's financial relationship with Beijing. Kamal Haider reports from a market in Islamabad.
The outgoing government has already left a debt which is unsurpassed by any other government, almost doubling the country's debt to the foreign world. And of course, that will entail many challenges for Imran Khan's government, which says that it wants to move on a policy which will make the country more sovereign. The people of Pakistan have voted for change. They have already seen the dollar spin out of control against the Pakistani rupee. And that, of course, will translate to hyperinflation. What they will be hoping for is the new government to come out with measures that will alleviate the suffering of the people and reduce inflation.
Joining us now from London is Gareth Leather, Senior Emerging Markets Economist at Capital Economics. Good to have you with us. First of all, how big a financial crisis is Pakistan facing?
It's facing a mounting one, and an increasingly serious one as well. Now, the backdrop to this is the big infrastructure projects that are currently going on in the country. Now, these began a couple of years ago, and in many ways, they're exactly what Pakistan needs. They're going to build bridges, railways, roads, energy plants, which is what basically Pakistan needs to get its own economy back on track. The problem is that the money is coming from China. Nobody really knows who it's coming from, but it's left Pakistan with a lot of debt. It's also led to the emergence of a big current account deficit as well, a surge in imports of capital goods needed for the construction phase of this project. And so they're increasingly facing quite an acute crisis. What they've been doing over the past few months is nothing really more than stopgap measures. So they've allowed the currency to weaken a little bit. They've raised interest rates. They've been spending their foreign exchange reserves, but it's increasingly got to the point that they need something a lot more drastic. And there's a lot of rumours now that they're going to be applying for an IMF loan over the next, probably the next couple of weeks even.
You mentioned the foreign currency reserves, and when those start dwindling, usually the clock starts ticking down, doesn't it? How much time does the new government have to deal with this?
So these foreign exchange reserves, they've fallen by about half over the past year or so, and are now the equivalent to around 2 months' worth of imports. So they've got a little bit of time, but the trajectory, the way things are going, is pretty clear. And without a sudden surge in exports, which seems very unlikely given the competitive problems that Pakistan has, it's really only got one solution, which is another loan. Now, they'd ideally get that from China or maybe somewhere in the Middle East, and there's rumours of going around of a deal maybe in the offing. But that's going to be nothing more than just a stopgap. What they need is more dramatic measures, which I think the IMF will ask them to provide.
Well, talking precisely about those dramatic measures, because money usually comes with strings attached, will that mean that Imran Khan will have to backtrack on some of those campaign pledges?
Exactly. So the IMF is going to be quite tough, I suspect, on a number of areas. First, it's going to demand a lot more transparency on these Chinese investment projects that at the moment nobody really knows where the money's coming from, nobody knows who's going to pay for it, nobody knows who's getting what. So they're going to want a lot more transparency there. Now, that's going to upset the Chinese who like the idea of the fact that nobody knows exactly how much they're making from these projects. They're also going to demand a significant tightening of fiscal policy, which means that Imran Khan, who was elected on these pledges to kind of create an Islamic welfare state in Pakistan, is going to basically have to do the opposite. He's going to have to cut spending rather than increase it. Now, that's going to be quite unpopular. I think the one thing he's got going for him is that it's still obviously very early on in his term in office, so he can at least blame the opposition. But straight away, he's going to have some tough choices to make.
Gareth Leather there from Capital Economics. Thanks.
Thank you.
Still to come on Counting the Cost, opponents are calling it the poison package. A bill to lift restrictions on pesticides is being voted on in one of the world's biggest food exporters. But first, the soybean market is going bananas. In retaliation to US tariffs, China has slapped a 25% levy on US soybeans. While the USA is the biggest grower, China the top buyer. The beans are a key part of the global food chain and used in animal feed. China is also trying to shift its supply chain to Latin America and boost domestic production. Our China correspondent, Adrian Brown, has this report from the northeast of the country.
Farmland is precious in China. Only 15% of the country is arable. That makes the lush and fertile province of Heilongjiang very important, especially now. Close to the border with Russia, this is soybean country. China's the world's largest consumer of soybeans, but it can't grow enough, and so is reliant on imports to meet demand. That means the decision to impose a 25% levy on US soybeans creates risk. Yet, in this province, the trade fight appears to be having a welcome impact. Farmers like Mun Fanling are being urged by the local government to switch their fields to soy from corn, offering subsidies as an incentive. That'll raise incomes. Mun says he has a lot to thank President Trump for.
When China stops importing from the United States, it's possible the price of domestic soybeans will go up, and that means we will make more money.
Soybeans may flourish in this province, but only around 10% of those consumed in China are domestically grown. The instruction to local farmers to grow more soybeans was a political priority. But the reality is this: China is a long way from ever being self-sufficient in soybeans, which means it's going to be reliant on imports for years to come.
Hi everybody, I am a soybean.
In this cartoon video, China appears to be targeting US farmers. It's been airing on the International Service of State TV and has a clear message: China can buy soybeans from other countries.
If that happens, soybean farmers in the US could take an even greater hit.
The soybean plays an essential role in the Chinese diet, used in cooking oil, sauce, tofu, as well as animal feed. The government's now taking action to ensure there's no shortage.
The government is offering more subsidies to soybean farmers, so I believe the government has been very supportive to the whole soybean industry.
In the past, cheap soybean imports hurt Chinese growers, but the tariff war with the United States could secure their future.
This week, China's Huawei overtook Apple as the world's #2 seller of smartphones. The market leader is Samsung, but Apple is still a hugely profitable business. This week, it joined a very exclusive club. On Thursday, following a spike in its shares, its total stock market valuation hit $1 trillion, helping it hit that milestone better than expected quarterly revenue. But the global market for smartphones is slowing, according to the International Data Corporation. Higher selling prices and market saturation are among factors weighing on growth. Apple's next move is to take on Netflix in video streaming. It's already hiring the talent to make original shows. Social media giant Facebook says it's deleted fake accounts attempting to influence the US midterm elections. Almost 300,000 people followed the suspended pages. Alan Fisher reports from Washington, D.C.
The founder of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, went to Capitol Hill in April to admit his company hadn't done enough to stop foreign groups trying to influence the 2016 US presidential election.
We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake. And it was my mistake, and I'm sorry.
Now, as part of its continuing investigation into election interference, it discovered it's happening again. And so it has suspended 32 pages on that platform and Instagram, which it also owns.
They are going to be a hair trigger alert for the foreseeable future. So any instances that crop up like this, they're likely to take action and then be public about that action.
The company uses artificial intelligence and human investigators to flag up automated accounts. They normally deal with divisive social issues aimed at fanning conflict and upset. One page called Resistors created an event, a counter-protest to a Unite the Right rally, a white nationalist gathering in Washington, D.C. in August. It was found to be a fake group, and the page was disabled and the event deleted. It says it can't definitively tie the suspended accounts to Russia, but suggests it was possibly involved. American intelligence agencies have been warning for months Russia's efforts to undermine American democracy are active and are a threat to November's elections. At a cybersecurity summit in New York, the Homeland Security Secretary said the country is facing what she called a hurricane of threats.
Let me also again take this opportunity to issue a warning, as I have in other forums and speeches, to any foreign power that would consider meddling in our networks or in the affairs of our democracy. The United States will no longer tolerate or accept your interference. You will be exposed and you will pay a high price.
Facebook has been heavily criticised for not doing enough to stop outside interference in the 2016 election. It's determined that won't happen again, and it says it continues to work with the FBI to identify threats and remove them from its platforms.
Well, it's estimated that 97% of Iran is suffering from some form of drought. We sent Zain Basravi to Tehran to take a look at the reasons behind the shortage.
Every day, a small group of Iranian farmers meet up at the edge of their town. Once wet fields of Isfahan, lush with crops, now barren land. By a dry canal, they beg for government help.
We're Iranian citizens too. We are Iranians who live in this part of the country. We just want to be heard. People are really tired. They can't make ends meet. They go to bed hungry.
Mustafa Ben-Vidi lost an eye during fighting between police and protesting farmers in March. Acute water shortages are worsening problems, such as inflation and unemployment. And there are warning signs of rising anger.
More conflicts are expected to break out. An empty stomach doesn't have any religion. People are going to have to fight for every single drop of water, especially in dry regions like this that are hit hard by drought and climate change.
Environmental experts say weather is a small part of the problem. They blame years of government mismanagement for the man-made water crisis. Since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, the government's rush to develop industries meant skipping environmental impact assessments before building dams and piping water around the country. One solution has been to try using less water for things like these. But most of Iran's water is used on farms, where old ways of watering crops means waste on an industrial scale. Environmental experts also say the government needs to take the problem more seriously.
First, we need to revise some laws and adopt a procedure for the stable development and management of water resources, so we can better preserve water and control usage, so we can be hopeful to have better conditions in the next 1 or 2 decades.
Even by summer standards, these riverbeds in the north of the capital Tehran are drier than usual. That's being felt downstream, where they feed ancient underground springs.
From up here, you can really get a sense of the impact of the country's water shortage on public facilities. In just 20 years, a single generation, what was once a sizable body of water, has been reduced to little more than a wading pool.
People who live here say they had to plug part of the pool to collect enough water for kids to play and escape the summer heat. Some of them are old enough to remember when the pool was full.
I remember my childhood. Me and my friends used to bike here and swim. Now it's 50 square meters. Back then it was about 5,000. It was deep and considered dangerous for swimming.
For now, it's enough for these kids to cool off and have some fun, unconcerned perhaps that when they have children of their own, the little water they have left probably won't be here.
Now, from water shortages to wildfires, the past 12 months have raised global awareness about the economic and human cost of extreme heat events. We've seen wildfires in places unprepared for such outbreaks due to unusually hot weather. Drought and blistering heat have been turning forests into tinderboxes in places that were previously fire-free. You need a number of ingredients for wildfires in particular, and climate change is one of them. Let's tally events so far this year. Sweden has experienced 65 fires already this year, up from an annual average of 3 fires over the past decade. Blazes are now happening as far north as the Arctic Circle. That's according to Copernicus, the European Union's Earth observation program. At least 91 people died last month in the worst wildfire to hit Greece in decades. Fire raced through a seaside area northeast of Athens. And in the US, the annual average number of large fires has doubled since the 1970s, putting lives and livelihoods at risk. Gabriel Elizondo has more from the destroyed town of Keswick.
The entire community of Keswick, California, has been turned to ash. Nothing remains. A once lively little town of about 700 people now resembles something like a faraway planet from a science fiction movie. The fire that roared through here was described as a tornado of flames. There was nothing firefighters could do to stop it.
The way that fire front was coming through, it was going to do what it wanted to do. We might be able to save one little spot here, but the risk would have been just immense to try and even be anywhere near there.
What remains are the remnants of people's lives. There are small signs of life here, like the burnt pages of this children's book. It's silent. There isn't a sound. There's still a mandatory evacuation zone. Residents aren't being allowed back. Only the occasional emergency vehicle passes by. Ironically, the only color remaining in town, a red fire hydrant that was no match for the flames.
It's the middle of the day, but the sun can barely be seen because it's so gray and dark here. The sun can barely peek out through the thick layer of smoke and ash that covers the air, not only here, but in this entire region of California. Doctors say people that inhale this smoke now face health risks.
By all accounts, everyone here was able to flee just before the fire overtook them. The residents are mostly low income. The future of the historic town is now in doubt.
I don't know if they'll have the resources to rebuild. Hopefully those who have insurance have the opportunity, but those who don't, it's a low-income type of area, so I'm not sure that a lot of people will be able to rebuild.
If they decide to rebuild, it will be a new town because the old one simply no longer exists.
Well, joining us now from London is Sam Fankhauser. Sam is the director of the Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment. Good to have you with us. So first of all, how unusual are the extreme heat events we've been witnessing this year?
Well, at the moment, these events still feel slightly unusual. We sort of talk about record temperatures, certainly in the Northern Hemisphere. But if we start looking forward and factor in climate change, this will become the new normal. There are predictions that the kind of heat we have this year, we might experience every other year from about 2040 onwards.
That's quite scary. You mentioned climate change there. How is it linked to climate change? Break it down for us.
Well, there's quite a clear link between the probability of having a heat wave and climate change. The climate or the weather sort of fluctuates, but you add a stock of temperature on top of that fluctuations, and we are about 1 degree warmer now on global average than we were in pre-industrial times 100, 200 years ago. And that means that we can statistically start to show that the probability of certain events increases because of climate change. What we're currently seeing in Northern Europe, preliminary estimates tell us, is about 2 times as likely than it would have been if there wasn't man-made global warming.
What sort of heat events should we expect to occur every other year going forward? More of the same or something even more a little intense?
It could probably even become more intense, and we shouldn't just talk about only heat and temperature. Climate change changes a lot of variables that can be dangerous to us. We will see more drought events, and that can be really, really disruptive. We can look at Southern Africa, the Cape region at the moment. where water is in very, very short supply, and that causes huge disruption and damage. We might have too much water in other instances, extreme downpours, flooding events, hurricanes, typhoons. We've seen examples of that in the US a year ago with hurricanes like Maria and Harvey. We see it in Japan at the moment. Again, there are very high damages associated with too much water, as much as damage from not enough water.
So
then, of course, you have the heat waves.
So just listening to you speak there, one assumes this will be very disruptive to current patterns of economic activity, right?
It will be very disruptive. We can adapt to certain things. We can change our agricultural practices. We can plant different crops. We can air condition our houses. So it's a lot of things we can do, but it will ultimately be very disruptive. We will have to change our infrastructure, the way we do things. Infrastructure is very long-lived. Buildings, cities, trains, power stations, they live for 20, 30, 40 years. If you have to redesign and retrofit climate change adaptation onto those structures, that will be very disruptive and very expensive. It will be worth doing because we have a different climate, but it will be very, very expensive.
It's been fascinating talking to you. Thanks so much, Sam.
My pleasure.
And finally, a Brazilian government commission has recommended easing restrictions on the use of pesticides. It says the move would help aid the agricultural industry. But families in rural areas say pesticides are already contaminating air, food and water, causing death and disease. Daniel Schweimler reports.
The residents of Limoeiro do Norte in northeastern Brazil live by agriculture, but many of them are also killed by it. These widows and their families have been fighting for years for compensation, for recognition, they say, that their husbands died from diseases contracted while spraying pesticides with inadequate protection. Dona Maria's husband, José, died 12 years ago.
He asked me not to give up, that I should keep fighting for justice. That was his last request.
Brazil uses 20% of the pesticides produced for world markets. It's difficult to avoid, seeping into this local reservoir from neighbouring soya fields. It may look idyllic, but extensive fumigation has poisoned this air that I'm breathing, the water that the people here drink, and the food that they grow. A way of life poisoned by the big agricultural companies' quest for short-term profit. 4 of the 10 pesticides most commonly used in Brazil are banned in Europe. University of Ceará studies found cancer rates here 40% higher than the national average.
We get worried hearing that so many people are ill, but what can I do? I need to keep working to pay my bills.
But cancer is not the only problem. Antonia's daughter, Manuela, suffers a congenital disease which doctors believe was caused by pesticides.
Even if we plant vegetables or fruits in our yard, we can't be sure that air or water aren't contaminated. According to the studies, it seems everything is contaminated here.
Many others here, including Marcia's daughter Sofia, suffer similar diseases.
When doctors from Ceará University did research here, they identified a chemical substance in my daughter's blood that was banned in the 1990s.
However, a government commission is recommending a relaxation of the existing regulations to allow the powerful agribusiness industry to spray more.
This is one of the best proposals for Brazilian society. We want to make sure the farmers provide the best food for the population. This bill is for food safety.
Campaigners say laws are flouted and monitoring is poor.
What they are trying to do is to remove or limit the authority of health and environmental authorities in the process of registering new pesticides. And we think that's very dangerous, that we don't think that this means to modernize the system, and it would take Brazil way back.
Justice here moves slowly, bogged down in bureaucracy. But the fight to be heard for a response from the powerful agribusinesses and a distant government goes on.
And that's our show for this week. But remember, you can get in touch with us via Twitter. Use the hashtag AJCTC when you do. Or drop us an email. countingthecost@aljazeera.net is our address. There's more for you online at aljazeera.com/CTC. That'll take you straight to our page, which has individual reports, links and entire episodes for you to catch up on. That's it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Sami Zaidan from the whole team here. Thanks for joining us. The news on Al Jazeera is next.